Welcome to all my Late Night Mysteries listeners. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Today's episode is about a sighting of a boy who had slept over at his friend's house. He had seen something that had wanted to come into the house, but a cat had inspired him to spring into action. To know more about his story, stay tuned to the horror and terrifying experiences to be told. I am Wraith. This is Late Night Mysteries, and you are listening to Listener's Tales Edition.
Disclaimer. This is a work of fiction. Any names, characters, businesses, places, events, or incidents are fictitious. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental.
For today's episode, Baharin will read our listener's email. Hand over to you, Baharin.
Thank you, Wraith. We often hear of animals having the uncanny ability to sense danger, emotions, and even things we as humans don't fully understand. Although inspiring, this does not mean we can become complacent in creating a safe space for ourselves. The following story was recalled by Joey, who had good-naturedly agreed to spend the night with his best friend, who was left alone at home. Something had happened that night that involved himself and Mumu, the cat. This listener quotes, "Hello, Late Night Mysteries. I'm Joey. I am writing to share my experience that happened quite some time ago. It was while staying at a friend's house and I saw something that, till this day, I could not believe if what I had seen was real or just a product of my own imagination. Hadi and I have known each other since we were in preschool. We practically grew up together in the same neighborhood in Boon Lay, Singapore. Hanging out at each other's house is second nature to us. So, when Hadi asked me if I'd like to come over that day, I agreed without any hesitation. Both of us lived in the same block. My family stayed at a unit on the 5th floor, and Hadi's unit is on the ground floor. His unit is special in that there is a back door in the kitchen. We used to come and go via that kitchen door and helped ourselves to drinks from the fridge. His parents treated me like one of their own, so I never felt like a stranger there. The day Hadi invited me over was the first time he had to stay home alone. His parents and younger siblings had gone to Malaysia to visit some relatives. And as the end-of-year exams were coming, his parents decided that it was best that he stayed home that week so that he could concentrate on the remedies, which at that time was already going on in full swing. Hadi didn't mind one bit. In fact, he was elated at being left alone. his first stab at independence, as he likes to call it. That night, after dinner at my place, we went to his house on the pretext of studying. My mother wasn't convinced that we would be doing any studying that night, but since it was already Friday, she allowed me to keep Hadi company. We dragged 2 mattresses to the living room and planned to stay up all night playing video games. Well, as the saying goes, we can only plan, but executing it is another ball game altogether. As I was already tired from that day's activities in school, I gave up on the video game early and lay exhausted on the thin mattress. It was not even midnight. The last thing I remembered before I drifted off to sleep was Hadi's cat, Mumu, making itself comfortable beside Hadi, who was still concentrating on his video game. Somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up with a start as I stared at the semi-familiar surroundings of Hadi's living room. The only light came from the corridor outside that shone in through the upper glass pane of the living room window. Hadi was sound asleep a few feet from me. I got up, feeling the urge to use the toilet, and walked quietly to the kitchen not far from where we were sleeping. Business done, I opened the fridge, hoping for something to drink. It was then that I heard a scratch coming from the kitchen door. My first thought was Mumu. I heard its pitiful meowing and the incessant scratching from the other side as if begging me to let it in. Without thinking, I opened the door and looked down, hoping to see Mumu rushing in. But there was nothing of that sort. The back alley was dark and desolate. The courtyard opposite was also empty. The place was eerily quiet. A gush of wind blew and I shivered involuntarily. Shrugging, I closed the door. While locking it, I suddenly remembered my last memory of Mumu. The last time I saw him, he was coiled up beside Hadi before I had gone to sleep. If Mumu was in the house, then what was outside the door? I walked quickly back to the living room, and true enough, I found Mumu wide awake, crouching beside Hadi and growling softly. I reached out to pet him, but he backed away and continued staring intently at the kitchen as if something there was taking up all of his attention. The hair at the back of my neck stood. Who was scratching the door, and why? Wasn't there any cat outside when I opened the door? And what was wrong with Mumu? Still wondering, I returned to the kitchen to fetch my forgotten drink. I did not bother with the lights, as the kitchen was well lit by the corridor light. I had just opened the fridge door when I heard the scratching again. This time, coming from the metal pane of the kitchen window located beside the door. I stood there, holding onto the fridge, and stared intently at the window. Guided by the light from the fridge, I saw the metal pane of the window being pried open. I knew the bottom panel was a bit loose, and Hadi's father had wedged a wooden pellet on it to keep it shut. I watched in horror as the wooden pellet loosened itself and fell to the floor with a dull thud. The panel flipped upwards, and I saw a pair of creepy, dark, gnarled hands with pointy fingers reaching in. Through the narrow frame, I saw the most hideous face I had ever seen. The eyes were red, and the face was charred black. It peered in. Its horrific eyes looked about wildly around the kitchen before settling on me. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I felt the air being sucked out of me as the silence around me intensified. Somewhere in the silence of my consciousness, I heard a hiss and spat of an angry cat. I look around, finding it's Mumu. It stood at the kitchen entrance and growled angrily at the thing on the window. Furs raised at an alarming angle. I watched in muted horror as the figure at the window attempted to reach further in through the narrow window pane. Without warning, Mumu lounged forward, hitting the small rubbish bin near the sink. This act caused the bin to topple with a loud clanging sound, and I was somehow snapped back into the present. I turned on the kitchen lights, but the thing at the window was no longer there. Grabbing a broom, I quickly closed the metal pane and wedged it tight with the broom across it. Reciting whatever verse of prayers I could think of, I turned back towards the living room. My heart beating wildly from the fright earlier. Mumu returned to sit beside Hadi, who was blissfully unaware of what had happened. I scooted closer to Mumu, seeking solace and comfort around him, before drooping down to sleep. To this day, I never told Hadi what I saw that night. Throughout the week, when he was alone before his family came back, I loyally stayed with him. The incident did not occur again, and I locked the doors and windows tight, much to Hadi's amusement. Maybe what I did was to ease the guilt of opening his kitchen door that fateful night. I did not want history to repeat itself. It is not something I wish to encounter again. Well, anyway, thank you, Late Night Mysteries, for reading my email. See you guys next time. Well, based on Joey's story, if you hear things in the middle of the night, always exercise caution. If you're not expecting anyone, the wise thing you would do is not to open the door but look through the peephole. Especially when you don't know who is on the other side. You never know who or what you're inviting into the house. It's better to be safe than sorry, right? I'm Baharin. Thank you for listening. And now, back over to you, Wraith.
Thank you, Baharin. So guys, if you want to drop us feedback or have any stories to share, email us at latenightmysteries@gmail.com. Alternatively, you may send them to our Late Night Mysteries social media platforms on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. And don't forget to follow and share our podcast on Spotify and all our social media platforms as mentioned. Once again, I am Wraith. Thank you for listening, and I will see you on the next episode of Late Night Mysteries.